You're listening to Kuma English Listening Hub, and in today's episode, we're taking a proper deep dive into a surprisingly powerful force: how British culture actually travels around the world in the 21st century. Now, you might be thinking of the usual clichés: red buses, afternoon tea, the Queen, and perhaps a slightly knackered English teacher telling you that everyone still watches the BBC at 6 o'clock sharp. Fair enough, those images exist, but the real story of modern British culture is far messier, more digital, and frankly, far more interesting. Today, we'll explore how everyday British life, our tea habits, television, humour, music, fashion, and even our small talk, quietly slips across borders through social media, streaming platforms, and travel. Think of this episode as a sort of BBC Radio 4 documentary, but with a mug of tea in hand and a dash of TikTok on the side. Section 1, a new topic category: arts and entertainment. Our main focus today sits comfortably in the category of arts and entertainment, but we'll weave in social trends, digital culture, and a pinch of history as well. We're asking, how do people around the world encounter Britishness in 2025? And is it still the Union Jack and Shakespeare? Or has the picture become rather more complicated? To answer that, we need to move beyond the postcard view. For many learners, British culture arrives through Netflix, Spotify, YouTube, and, increasingly, short-form videos. A teenager in Brazil might pick up the word mate from a London-based vlogger. A student in Vietnam may binge a crime drama set in a rainy northern city and end up with a surprisingly accurate impression of British sarcasm, if not of British weather. Section 2, from empire to algorithms. Historically, British culture spread through the British Empire, a story of ships, trade routes, and, quite frankly, a fair amount of exploitation. Tea, cricket, and the English language itself travelled in the luggage of soldiers, traders, and administrators. Today, it's not gunboats and railways, but algorithms that carry British culture abroad. When a streaming platform recommends a gritty British drama, it isn't because a colonial governor has decided you ought to watch it. It's because a line of code has quietly concluded you might be keen on complex characters with slightly miserable lives. And this is where things get interesting. The old stereotype of a stiff upper lip Englishman sipping Earl Grey in a spotless drawing room is giving way to a far broader cast of characters. Second-generation Londoners switching between English and another heritage language. Scottish comedians poking fun at Westminster politics. And queer artists rewriting what it means to be properly British. In other words, British culture abroad is no longer a single, polished export. It's a constantly updated playlist. Section 3T, football and other everyday exports. Let's start with the classics: tea and football. If you ask many people what they associate with Britain, those two will still come up again and again. And they're not wrong. They're spot on. In fact, tea in Britain is not just a drink. It's an emotional support system. Someone's broken up with their partner? Put the kettle on. Trains cancelled again? Put the kettle on. Political chaos? Definitely put the kettle on. The phrase, fancy a cuppa, carries with it an entire philosophy of coping. The idea that, come what may, a hot drink and a quiet chat will get you more or less sorted. This habit has travelled. In many countries, chain cafes with vaguely British names sell English breakfast tea alongside scones and something that resembles a Victoria sponge. Is it authentic? Purists might complain, but for most people abroad it's close enough. And in that close enough space, a certain idea of British coziness, of rainy afternoons and steaming mugs, takes root. Then there's football. The Premier League is one of Britain's most visible exports, beamed into living rooms from Lagos to Lima. The chants, the accents, the slightly chaotic interviews after the match. All of these give viewers a sense of everyday spoken British English. Listen carefully and you'll hear a range of regional voices, from a Mancunian manager saying the team played proper brilliant football, to a London striker thanking the fans. Cheers, you lot were amazing tonight. For ESL learners, this is gold dust. A chance to move beyond textbook pronunciation and into the real, occasionally mumbled, language of the street and the stadium. Section 4, British humour. Dry, dark and delightfully awkward. If there's one aspect of British culture that both fascinates and confuses learners, it's our sense of humour. British humour is often described as dry, deadpan, or self-deprecating. That means we tend to make ourselves the butt of the joke, rather than endlessly boasting. Picture a standard British exchange. A. How's work? B. Oh, you know, utterly soul-destroying, but apart from that, spot on. On the surface, it sounds grim. Underneath, though, it's a way of saying, it's tough, but I'm fine, don't fuss. This kind of joking complaint turns up in comedy shows, panel programs, and everyday conversations. When these exchanges appear in sitcoms that are streamed worldwide, foreign audiences start to recognize the pattern. British people will frequently say the opposite of what they mean, with a raised eyebrow that signals, I'm joking, mostly. The global popularity of shows like The Office or more recent mockumentaries has spread this comedic style. Foreign fans begin to adopt phrases like, I'm absolutely knackered, or that meeting was a complete nightmare, in a similarly exaggerated tone, half complaining, half laughing at themselves. Section 5 TikTok, vlogs, and the accidental ambassadors. In the past, cultural ambassadors were carefully chosen, writers, diplomats, and BBC presenters with impeccable diction. Nowadays, an 18-year-old in Manchester with a decent phone camera can unintentionally become the world's window into British life. On TikTok and Instagram Reels, short clips show everything from a proper Sunday roast to chaotic nights out, from quiet canal walks to rants about housing prices. Our modern ambassadors are not necessarily polished or diplomatic. Some of them are frankly furious about the cost of living. Others are busy demonstrating the difference between quite good, which, in Queen's English, can actually mean not that great, and not bad at all, which is, confusingly, rather positive. These micro-lessons in British understatement are picked up, mimicked, and remixed by learners across the globe. A student in Poland might start saying, yeah, it's all right, I suppose, to express mild enthusiasm, perfectly echoing that famously British reluctance to sound too excited. What's striking is that much of this is unscripted. Nobody in the Foreign Office has approved these videos. Instead, British culture seeps across borders through memes, everyday rants, and jokes told at 3 in the morning after a long shift. Section 6 Music, Accents and Identity. British music has long travelled well, from the Beatles and the Rolling Stones to Adele and Stormzy. But streaming has transformed the way accents and identities move with the music. Rap and grime from London, Birmingham, and Manchester showcase local slang and rhythm. A listener in Mexico City may not catch every reference to a particular estate or high street, but they'll hear a confident, contemporary British English, one that doesn't necessarily sound like a BBC newsreader. This is important. For years, standard British English was presented as the goal. Polished, region-neutral, and faintly upper class. Now, millions of listeners abroad are discovering that Britishness includes Caribbean-influenced London English, Scots vernacular, and a host of regional varieties. When learners start to imitate these voices, even just a phrase or two like, "You all right, mate," they're participating in a much broader, more democratic cultural exchange. Section 7 Soft Power and Everyday Objects. There's a term in international relations, soft power. It refers to a country's ability to influence others through attraction rather than force. British soft power used to mean the royal family, the BBC World Service, and a respectable bookshelf of English literature. Today, soft power can also look like a reusable coffee cup emblazoned with a London skyline, a tote bag quoting Shakespeare in slightly wonky font, or a YouTube channel explaining the difference between GCSEs and A-levels. Even everyday objects become mini-cultural ambassadors. A student in Taiwan studying from a textbook published in Oxford is quietly absorbing not only grammar, but also images of British school uniforms and rainy playgrounds. A cafe in Seoul decorated with Union Jack bunting sells British brunch, which might make a Londoner raise an eyebrow and mutter blimey. That's not quite right, but still contributes to a global picture of what British might mean. Section 8 The Tension. Tradition versus change. Of course, there is a tension here. Many people abroad still expect Britain to conform to a certain script. quaint villages, polite conversation, and tea at 4 o'clock sharp. When reality doesn't match, when visitors encounter multicultural cities, political arguments, or less than perfect public transport, they sometimes feel a bit cheated. But this tension is productive. Modern British culture lives in the gap between the postcard and the pavement. On the one hand, you have heritage, castles, stately homes, and the National Trust gift shop selling very tasteful biscuits. On the other, you have street food markets, protest marches, and underground music scenes. The story the world receives is therefore slightly contradictory. We are both the land of Jane Austen and the land of drill music, both the home of Shakespeare and of reality TV. For advanced learners like you, navigating this contradiction is part of understanding contemporary Britain. Section 9: What this means for your English. So, what does all of this cultural movement mean for you as a C2 level learner of English? First, it gives you a rich palette of voices, registers, and attitudes to draw on. You don't have to sound like a textbook character. You can choose to be slightly ironic in a meeting, using an understated, "that's ambitious," to express polite doubt. Or you might pepper your speech with a few casual expressions. "Cheers for helping me out," or "I was absolutely knackered after that exam." Secondly, understanding British cultural references helps you follow more complex conversations. When someone jokes about putting the kettle on after bad news, you'll know it's not really about tea. It's about comfort and continuity. When a colleague says that a chaotic situation is all sorted now, you'll hear the relief behind the understatement. Finally, by engaging with British culture in its modern, messy form, through podcasts, dramas, comedies, vlogs, and music, you develop a sensitivity to nuance. You start to hear the difference between genuine enthusiasm, "that's brilliant," and gentle sarcasm, "oh brilliant, the train's cancelled again." That sensitivity is exactly what distinguishes a C2 listener from the rest. Closing: how to use this episode. To make the most of this episode, listen again and notice the expressions that capture a particularly British attitude. Spot on, proper, keen on, fair enough, sorted, mate, cheers, blimey, knackered. Pay attention not only to the words themselves, but also to the tone behind them. Then, try to observe how British culture appears in your own surroundings. Do you see Union Jacks on products? British shows on your streaming platform? Cafes offering British food? Ask yourself which parts seem authentic and which feel like a carefully packaged fantasy. If you'd like to take this further, watch a British documentary or drama after this podcast and compare the cultural images you notice there with the ones we've discussed today. Notice the accents, the body language, the small polite phrases like "would you mind?" or "I'm terribly sorry." But these details will help your English move from simply correct to genuinely sophisticated. Thanks for listening to Kuma English Listening Hub. If this journey through the modern export of British culture has given you something to think about, or even just made you fancy a cup of tea, then I'd say we're more or less sorted. Until next time, cheers and happy listening.